Jonas Granger leaned over the long conference table, flipping through performance reports from Warehouse 12. The numbers stared back at him, cold, clinical, and deeply concerning. Turnover was the highest in the entire company. Absenteeism was flagged repeatedly, and customer complaints about delayed deliveries had doubled in just 3 months. Buried in a field report from a recent district visit, a single line caught his eye. New hires seemed to burn out quickly, possible morale issues with the night shift. That made no sense. Warehouse 12 was in a prime location. The staff was decently compensated, and freight flow had remained steady. Everything on paper said the operation should be smooth, even efficient. So why did it feel like something was broken? "Send me the list of all new hires from that warehouse in the past year," Jonas said to his assistant. She paused, giving him a curious look. "You thinking of going down there?" Jonas didn't respond right away. His eyes wandered to the tall office windows as the sunset cast long, golden shadows over rows of industrial rooftops. He stared out, his voice quiet but firm, the weight of the decision settling over him. I think I can't afford to keep guessing anymore." 3 years earlier, he had inherited the company from his late father, a man who had built it from nothing but sweat and conviction. Since then, Jonas had doubled operations, expanded regionally, digitized their entire infrastructure. But in the process, he drifted away from the people who kept everything running. The heartbeat of the company had grown faint. Most employees had never even seen his face. And for a while, he thought that was a good thing. 2 nights later, in the still darkness of a gravel lot behind Warehouse 12, a man stood alone. No one knew who he was. He wore a faded flannel shirt, black jeans, and steel 2T boots that he'd scuffed up himself to look worn. His beard was thicker than usual, and a pair of cheap glasses completed the transformation. He was no longer Jonas Granger, CEO. He was Joe, a temp worker, placed through a third-party staffing agency that had never dealt directly with this location. No one in that building had any reason to suspect a thing. A thin woman in a frayed hoodie leaned against the rear entrance, sipping from a dented thermos. She glanced over at him. "You the new guy?" "Yeah, Joe," he said, extending a hand with a hesitant, almost nervous smile. "Callie," she replied, shaking his hand. "I'm on week 3. Buckle up. Night shift's no joke." 5 minutes later, the door clattered open. The warehouse manager, a tall man with a buzz cut as sharp as his tone, stepped out, clipboard gripped like an extension of his arm. "Let's move," he barked. "We don't wait for stragglers. Joe, right? You're loading with Callie. Let's go." For the next 6 hours, Jonas was thrown into relentless motion. He hauled crates, scanned pallets, printed labels, and learned firsthand that these workers weren't lazy. They were exhausted. Breaks were rare, unpredictable, and often skipped entirely. At one point, a younger temp tried to sit down and catch his breath, barely 2 minutes in, when Ruddy, the manager, shouted, "Want a rest? Take it out of your paycheck." Jonas froze. Did he just say that? Callie leaned closer, nodding. "Yeah, he docks people. Not officially. But he'll find a way. You'll see." Jonas kept moving, but his mind reeled. Docking pay for taking a breath? He needed to see more, feel more, understand how deep this went. By hour 7, it became impossible to ignore. A kid named Brian, couldn't have been older than 19, staggered and collapsed onto a pallet. His breath came in shallow gasps, his shoulders shaking under the fluorescent lights. "Get up," Ruddy roared. "You want a nap? Do it at home. We don't pay people to sit." I haven't had a break yet," Brian panted, voice barely above a whisper. "You don't get breaks in your first month," Ruddy snapped. "Breaks are earned." Jonas froze mid-step. He didn't know what hurt more, The cruelty in Ruddy's voice, or the silence that followed? No one said a word. No one pushed back. A toxic culture had taken root, one that thrived on fear. The very warehouse Jonas's father had once proudly called a second home for people who worked hard had become something else entirely. Now Jonas had to face the truth. This was his legacy too. Brian slowly stood, his hands trembling as he tried to steady himself. "My contract says I get 2 breaks," he said, voice shaking. Ruddy's eyes narrowed, cold as steel. "Want to argue? Clock out." Brian stared at the floor. "I need this job," he whispered. And those 5 words hit Jonas like a punch to the gut. His jaw tightened. He looked away, fists clenched, heart pounding in his chest. He said nothing, just kept packing boxes, but every word Brian had spoken echoed inside him like thunder. 10 minutes later, Callie leaned in again and whispered, "He's not bluffing. If he thinks you're slacking, he'll mess with your hours, quietly. You won't even know until payday." Jonas gave a small nod. His eyes were distant now, his thoughts storming. He had built a machine to create opportunity, but somewhere along the line, that machine had been hijacked, and now it was chewing up the very people it was supposed to empower. He hadn't just overlooked a problem. He had let it grow. "How long has this been going on?" Jonas asked quietly. "Since I got here," Callie replied. "New hires don't get breaks, and if you speak up, he messes with your hours in the system, says it's a payroll glitch. No one dares to fight it." Jonas felt a slow, sick twist in his stomach. Cold realization settled into his core. He had trusted his district management team to keep oversight tight, to spot these kinds of failures. And Ruddy? Ruddy had always flown under the radar, not because he was clever, but because Jonas never thought he mattered. That negligence had created space for Rut to grow. Later, during the lunch break, 4 employees gathered near the shipping doors, sitting on overturned bins, their postures slumped, their movements slow. Jonas sat down beside them, drained from the physical toll of the shift, but more so from what he'd seen. Brian sat nearby, chewing slowly, each bite like a struggle, as if even eating had become a burden. "He's not wrong," an older man finally said. His voice was tired but firm. "Name's Terry, been here 8 years. Ruddy leaves guys like me alone, knows we've been around, but the new ones, he breaks them, grinds them down till they quit. Says it saves the company money." Jonas stared at the half-eaten sandwich in his hand. It no longer felt like food. It felt like a symbol of everything wrong. A quiet meal surrounded by silence and resignation. "Most people stay quiet," Terry continued. "No one wants to lose hours or get stuck with the bad shifts." Jonas leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. "What about HR?" Terry gave a dry, almost bitter laugh. "HR? That's in another state. Nobody calls HR, and even if you do, who's going to believe a temp over a manager?" Callie turned to Jonas, watching him closely. "You've been really quiet." "I'm listening," Jonas said simply. And that's exactly what he did for the rest of the shift. Listen, not just with his ears, but with his eyes, with his gut, with every sense honed by years in leadership, now fully engaged at ground level. He watched Ruddy yell, watched him adjust clock-ins on his tablet like it was just part of the process, watched him order Lisa to pretend she hadn't worked an extra hour, citing labor overages as justification. Lisa didn't argue. She just nodded, tired, trained to comply. By the time the first light of dawn began to creep through the warehouse slats, Jonas was completely drained. His body ached from the lifting, the moving, the pretending, but his mind, it was wide awake, sharper than it had been in months. He walked out with the others, not toward his truck, but to the small hotel around the corner. He showered, washed away the sweat, the grime, the guilt. Then, dressed in a dark navy suit and polished shoes, he stepped back into the man he used to be. He pulled out his phone. "Alina," he said after one ring, "I need you to meet me at Warehouse 12. Don't tell Ruddy." Before the sun was fully up, Jonas stood in the quiet hallway of Warehouse 12's office wing. The early morning light reflected off the polished glass as he stood there in his crisp suit, a jarring figure against the faded linoleum and humming fluorescent lights. The night shift had clocked out. Ruddy hadn't arrived for handoff yet. Lena entered quietly through the side door. Her expression faltered as soon as she saw him. "You're actually here?" she asked, eyes narrowing with disbelief. "I worked the night shift," Jonas said, "not as an observer, as a temp." She froze. "Wait, you mean you actually—" "I did," he cut her off, "and I saw everything." Her posture stiffened, but Jonas didn't give her time to recover. "Sit down, call Ruddy in when I tell you, and say nothing until I'm done." He opened the laptop that had been left on the desk, Ruddy's desk. With a few keystrokes, Jonas logged in using his executive credentials. He pulled up the time cards from the previous night. Ryan's profile loaded on screen. Clock in, 7:02 p.m. Clock out, 4:41 a.m. No recorded break, not even a flag. "You see that?" he said, voice tight. Alina nodded slowly. "Now watch this." He clicked over to security footage. Midnight, Brian sitting on a pallet, barely 2 minutes into a break, when Ruddy's voice cut through the audio. Loud, angry, commanding. The boy stood quickly, shoulders hunched, pale and clearly unwell. 3 hours into his shift, Jonas said quietly, and Ruddy tells him he hasn't earned a break. He's just a kid, 19, maybe 20. He wasn't being lazy. He was about to collapse. Alina dropped her gaze. "He's been flagged before, for late punches, missed tasks." Jonas turned to her. "Because he's being worked past the point of function?" He began pulling more files. Callie, Lisa, others. Patterns emerged. No breaks logged. Time cards manipulated. Edits made just before payroll submission. Always the new hires, never the veterans. "You know why?" he asked, his eyes still on the screen. Alina said nothing. "Because the veterans push back, but the rookies, they don't know better. Or they're too scared." Footsteps echoed outside the door. Jonas looked up. Alina nodded. "Send him in." Ruddy entered, coffee mug in hand. "Hey, I was told you wanted—" He stopped. His eyes locked on Jonas. Jonas didn't smile. "Close the door," he said. Ruddy frowned. "What's going on?" "I'm Jonas Granger. This is my company. And I've spent the last 9 hours working your night shift, right under your nose." Ruddy's face turned pale. "Wait, what? What? You didn't recognize me? Good. That means what I saw was real, not a performance." Jonas stepped forward, his voice low but unwavering. "Saw you tell employees they don't get breaks. I saw you threaten to dock pay. I saw you alter time cards." "Okay, hold on." Ruddy lifted a hand. "This is a misunderstanding." "No, it's not," Jonas said. "You violated labor law, manipulated records, and created a workplace built on fear. We were behind on output," Ruddy tried. "And that doesn't justify stealing people's time." "Brian's slow. I didn't threaten him." "You told him to clock out if he didn't like it. That is a threat." Ruddy looked away. "He's trying. He's a kid. And you? You're done here." "You're firing me." "Effective immediately. Alina will escort you out. Your access is revoked. I'm initiating a full audit of the past 4 quarters. Every single edit down to the minute will be reviewed." Alina nodded. "Understood." Outside, The day shift had begun. The low hum of forklifts and chatter filled the air. Jonas stepped out of the office, his gaze sweeping across the warehouse floor. The faces from last night were gone, but a few new ones moved slowly into the break room. Jonas walked to the shift board near the clock-in station. Names were neatly listed by shift. He pulled a marker from the holder and, in bold, confident letters, wrote, "Breaks are not optional. If you're not getting yours, come to me directly. Jonas Granger, CEO." An older man nearby squinted at the board, then turned to him. "Real?" Jonas didn't look away. "It is?" The man gave a quiet nod and walked off. Jonas stayed for a moment longer, watching the floor come alive, one shift at a time, one change at a time. But it was starting, and in his mind a new plan had already begun to form. Not just for Warehouse 12, but for every warehouse. Random shift audits, anonymous report lines, on-site HR reps. A new culture of visibility and accountability. And it would start now. With transparency, with people. With no more guessing. Jonas stepped outside and pulled out his phone. He dialed Callie. "Hello?" Her voice was groggy, thick with sleep. "It's Joe, actually. Jonas. Jonas Granger, the CEO." A long pause. "Oh." Her tone sharpened immediately, fully awake now. "I need you to come in 30 minutes early tomorrow night. You, Lisa, and Brian, if he's willing. I want to hear everything, not just what happened last night. I want the full story." "Well?" she asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. "Because I intend to fix this, and I want the people who lived through it to be part of how we do that." Silence on the line. Then, quietly, she replied, "Okay. I'll be there." Jonas ended the call and turned back toward the warehouse. Nothing had changed on the outside. Same flickering fluorescent lights, same stacks of pallets, same distant mechanical hum echoing through concrete walls. But something inside him, and inside this place, had shifted. And he wasn't going to let it slip back into the shadows. The following night, Jonas arrived early. No disguise this time. Just a charcoal gray polo with the Granger Freight logo stitched over his heart. He wasn't hiding anymore. In the break room, he sat alone at a table. In front of him, 2 coffees, a thick legal pad with worn edges from hours of scribbling, and a notepad filled with observations and questions. Callie walked in first, her worn-out hoodie replaced with a faded fleece jacket. She paused at the sight of Jonas, surprised but said nothing. She took the seat across from him, guarded but calm. 2 minutes later, Lisa entered. Her arms were crossed, her eyes cautious as if waiting for a trap to be sprung. Brian was the last to arrive. He looked tense, clutching a paper bag with his dinner, scanning the room before settling into the chair Jonas motioned toward. Jonas gave them a small nod. "I know this is weird," he began, "but thank you for coming." He slid the coffees across the table. "I'm not here to lecture. I'm here because I didn't know what was happening here, and I should have. That's on me." Brian dropped his eyes. Lisa stared at the tabletop. Callie leaned forward slightly, watching him closely. "I want the truth," Jonas continued. "Not just about Ruddy. I want to know everything that's been broken here. You've lived it. I haven't." Lisa finally spoke, her voice even but firm. "How far back do you want us to go?" "As far as you think I need to hear," Jonas replied. Callie turned to Brian. "You should start." Brian hesitated, fidgeting with a loose thread on his sleeve. He took a breath. "I started working here because I needed something steady," he said. "Didn't matter what it was. I was supposed to keep going with school, but my mom got sick. I dropped out to help with rent." His voice was quiet but steady, each word carrying a weight he didn't try to hide. First couple weeks I thought I was doing okay, but I never really knew if I was clocking in on time. Ruddy kept saying the clocks were off or the system didn't register me. Then my paycheck came up short, like $20. I asked him about it, and he told me to check my math. Jonas kept his face neutral. Did you report it? I didn't even know how, Brian said. Nobody tells you anything about HR unless you ask, and no one tells you what's allowed or not. You just figure it out. Lisa leaned back, arms still crossed. My first month, I brought my lunch from home, she said. Roddy told me temps don't get fridge privileges. I laughed, thought he was kidding. Next thing I know, he pulls my lunch out and throws it in the trash. Jonas frowned. That's not a real policy. Yeah, I figured that out later, Lisa replied. But by then, I didn't want to make trouble. I needed the hours. Golly nodded. He plays power games. Says stuff like, you want Saturday shifts? Earn it this week. Then he just gives it to whoever he wants anyway. Jordan. He always got the weekends. Never mattered if he was late. Jordan? Jonas asked. Last name? Wells. He worked nights, close with Ruddy. Jonas jotted the name down. Did you ever see Ruddy change people's hours? Callie gave a slow nod. Lisa stayed late once to help me finish a late pallet. We'd already clocked out. Ruddy said he'd fix it, but she only got paid to her original out time. Lisa's jaw tightened. I told him I didn't get the chance to flag it. He'd already left. He said, next time, say something sooner. Did anyone else know this was going on? Jonas asked. Sure, Callie said, but no one wanted to get on his radar. Brian finally looked up. He told me once if I asked too many questions, I'd get lost in the system. He said I'd be bounced between shifts until I quit. Jonas set his pen down. His voice was calm, but resolute. Writer's ends today. Ruddy's gone. I terminated him. It's not pending. It's done. He won't be coming back into this building, ever. The three of them stared at him in disbelief. Lisa's shoulders loosened. Callie blinked hard. Brian said nothing, but there was a shift in the air. For the next 2 weeks, Jonas continued. We're assigning a compliance officer from corporate to act as interim supervisor. After that, we'll either hire externally or promote internally, but this time, everything is transparent. He paused. We're also launching a rotating audit system across all 16 warehouses. Every shift. Random checks. No advance notice. And we're rolling out a new system for logging break times. Employees verify their breaks before clocking out. If it's wrong, you can flag it right then. Managers can't edit anything without it leaving a trail. Lisa raised an eyebrow. Why wasn't that already a thing? Because I trusted people like Ruddy to manage it honestly, Jonas said. That was my mistake. The room went quiet again. What about the people who already quit because of all this? Callie asked. I'm pulling every employee record from the past 18 months who worked under Ruddy. If we owe back pay, we'll pay it. If they want to come back, they'll get first interview. Brian looked at him, wary. Why now? Jonas met his eyes. Because I finally saw what I should have seen a long time ago. And now that I have, I won't ignore it. He stood, reached into his bag, and placed a thin folder on the table. One more thing. This is a complaint form, not for HR. It goes straight to me. You don't have to use it, but if something's ever wrong again and no one's listening, I will. As Jonas left the room, the 3 employees stayed seated, quiet, but watching him now with something different in their eyes. On the warehouse floor, Jonas met a woman in a red vest holding a clipboard. Her name tag read, M. Dorsey. You the one who fired Ruddy? She asked. Yeah. Place has been a mess. He thought he was untouchable. Not anymore, Jonas said. I'm here to listen. Then come with me. She walked him through the aisles. Workers moved steadily, not rushing. Not lost. Focused. Intentional. She pointed out the bottlenecks. We lost 2 positions last quarter. They said freight volume didn't justify them, but we're getting more specialty loads now. They take longer. Who approved that cut? Jonas asked. Regional, based on Ruddy's reports. Restore both positions today, Jonas ordered. They stopped near the packing station. A young woman was sealing boxes. Her elbow was wrapped in compression tape. She's injured? Mild sprain. Didn't report it, didn't want to get sent home. Jonas stepped closer. What's your name? Jenna. I'm Jonas. You don't have to work through pain. If you're hurt, speak up. She hesitated. I couldn't afford to lose a shift. I need the full week. You'll get support, and paid light duty if needed. She nodded, slowly returning to her task, more gently this time. Jonas turned to Dorsey. We need an injury reporting station. Anonymous if they prefer. Pull the last 6 months of logs. Anything missed? We fix it. Dory scribbled notes, then looked up. You're serious? Very. She held his gaze. Then we'll hold you to that. I expect you to. That night, Jonas stayed on the floor until midnight. No clipboard, no entourage. Just one man, quietly observing, asking questions, listening to stories. He spoke to 7 more employees. None sugarcoated their experience, but none held back either. And when he finally stepped outside into the cold night air, body weary but spirit steady, he knew. This wasn't just about Warehouse 12 anymore. It was about every warehouse he hadn't walked into yet, every shift he hadn't seen, every blind spot he'd let grow. In that era, it was immediately obvious that the men were taking complete ownership of their action. They were evaluated. Several of them hung a latch clipboard now hung from the wall with a laminated sheet titled Break Compliance Tracker. Employees signed next to their names after each rest period. It wasn't fancy, just paper and ink, but it was visible. It was transparent. And most importantly, no one needed to ask for permission anymore. Mara Dorsey, the interim supervisor, stood near the loading zone, coordinating a small but sharper-looking crew than the one Jonas had seen a week earlier. She spotted him and made her way over, wiping her hands with a stained shop rag. You picked a good night, she said. Shift rotation's about to start. You'll catch both crews. How's it going? Jonas asked. Hard, Mara admitted, but better. We slowed throughput by about 15%, but accuracy's up. Fewer call-outs, and for the first time in months, someone volunteered for overtime. Jonas nodded, quietly taking that in. Not dramatic progress, but real progress. They walked together toward the packing area. 2 new hires were sealing boxes side by side. One wore a wrist brace, the other had a translation app open on his phone. They worked with purpose, but without panic. No one barked at them, no one hovered. Jonas glanced at the whiteboard hanging nearby. Someone had written in thick black marker, safety, speed. Below it was a short list of shift goals. No corporate slogans, no fluff, just targets. Clear, achievable. Mara led Jonas into the back office. The door stood open. A faint smell of fresh paint lingered in the air. We repainted, she said. Ruddy kept it like a cave. No lights, no life. Jonas sat down at the same desk where, just days earlier, he had confronted a man who nearly broke this place from the inside. A new laptop sat waiting. He logged in. On the screen, Employee Feedback Welcome, Warehouse 12. Below it was a direct link to the anonymous reporting system, now rolled out company-wide just 3 days earlier. Mara sat across from him, arms folded. I reviewed Ruddy's shift logs, she said. He was logging ghost labor, assigning hours to people who'd already clocked out, then deleting the records later. We found over a dozen cases. Not enough to trigger payroll flags, Jonas asked. Nope, but enough to see the pattern. Jonas nodded. Legal's on it. He'll be held accountable. Mara studied him a moment. You don't look satisfied. Because of the numbers. Jonas looked up. Because of the people. Fixing one warehouse doesn't erase what we allowed to happen. People left. Some won't come back. And there's no spreadsheet that can track what that really costs. A soft knock came at the door. A young man with neatly cropped hair and a clipboard stepped inside. Hey, sorry, I was told to check in with you. I'm Marcus, new floor lead. This is my second shift. Mara motioned him in. Marcus, this is Jonas. Marcus blinked. Wait. The Jonas? Jonas stood, offered his hand. Nice to meet you. I wanted to meet you in person. Marcus looked nervous. Last night, one of the guys had a really bad migraine. I let him take his break early and shifted the rotation. I wasn't sure if I was allowed to. You were, Jonas said firmly. You don't need permission to take care of your people. That's leadership. Marcus gave a small nod, visibly relieved. I didn't want to overstep. You didn't, Jonas replied. You stepped up. After Marcus left, Mara said, He's young, but steady, and not afraid to ask questions. Good, Jonas said. We need a lot more of that. They walked back out to the warehouse floor. A forklift beeped as it reversed from a finished row. Lisa was reviewing an order sheet. With Callie nearby, both wore reflective safety vests. Lisa spotted him first. Evening, she called. Callie gave a short wave. You checking in on us? Not checking up, just checking in, Jonas said, offering a small smile. Wanted to see how things are flowing. Lisa held up her clipboard. 2 errors last night, both caught before the orders went out. We're double-checking high-value loads now, Callie added, and people are actually taking breaks, not just logging them, taking them. Jonas glanced around. The break area had been expanded, about 12 more feet. A second bench had been added. A stocked water station stood nearby, clean, accessible. Small changes, which can be deliberate ones. Anything you need from me? Jonas asked. Callie hesitated, then said, Just keep showing up, not just here, everywhere. I will, Jonas said. Lisa handed him a folded sheet of paper. A few of us put together some suggestions, peer mentorship, shift transparency, stuff like that. Jonas took the paper but didn't open it yet. Thank you, he said quietly. On his way out, he passed Brian in the loading bay. The young man was scanning packages, his movements quick, focused but steady. You holding up all right? Jonas asked. Brian looked up, startled, then nodded. Yeah, still warehouse work, but it feels different now. Different good. Yeah, Jonas said. Nobody flinches when someone raises their voice anymore. Brian smiled faintly. Yeah, that's new. Jonas looked out across the rows of freight. The work was still hard, the environment still rough, but the fear, the quiet, suffocating fear, was gone, and that mattered more than anything. He didn't stop to give a speech. There was no big announcement, no gathering in the break room, no dramatic exit. He just walked out the side door, quiet, steady, and the warehouse kept moving. The next morning, Jonas stood in front of his executive team at headquarters. We're not patching holes, he said. His voice was calm, clear, unshakable. We're rebuilding the foundation, one shift, one person at a time. The room was silent. Then his head of operations asked, Where do we start? Jonas didn't hesitate. The next warehouse.